Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Jake Gordon and Alex Lord. We got some big injury news in regards to the bullpen. Jesse Chavez, we didn't see him last night, but he is back up with the Major League club after his rehab assignment. It seems likely, unless he's just awful the rest of the way, that he will be on the postseason roster. We also got Colin McHugh, Nick Anderson, and Dosbel Hernandez all beginning their rehab assignments. They all appeared last night for Gwinnett. The results weren't exactly encouraging, but then again, you got to think about these guys. These are just rehab assignments. Nick Anderson hasn't pitched in months. Colin McHugh. Let's start with Colin McHugh because he only makes it through 0.2 innings. He gives up 4 runs, 3 hits, a couple walks. He's cooked, my guys. Like, this guy's only been out for a couple weeks. Like, there's just no way he is on the postseason roster.
Number one, I want to start off by saying this. People are way too hard on Colin McHugh. He was really good for a long time, and I understand he's kind of fallen off and he had some bad outings, but he gets treated so unfairly by this fan base, and it honestly kind of really annoys me. Like, he was really solid for us for a long time and never really got any kind of credit or anything. And I think it's kind of known that this was I don't think he was really hurt. This was kind of just a little vacation. And it's probably a vacation he's not going to come back from. He's probably going to retire. But I feel like this dude just got way too much hate during his tenure. Like, he was pretty solid for us for a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was really good last year. But the fact of the matter is every metric either was cut in half this year or doubled. So strikeouts fell in half. The walks doubled. The home runs doubled. Everything either fell by half or doubled for Colin McHugh this year compared to last. But yeah, you're right. He was lights out last year. He was one of Brian Snicker's best weapons.
He was good for the first half of this year.
Yeah, most versatile weapons out of the bullpen for Brian Snicker. I love him. Love the guy. He's apparently an ace on the golf course. So, if this is it for his baseball career, he's got that to fall back on. But yeah, I think it might be over for him.
Yeah, I mean, I loved Colin McHugh. I backed him for as long as I possibly could, but let's just call a spade a spade. I mean, he clearly does. His stuff is clearly deteriorated, whether it's the shoulder injuries that he's been on the IL for twice this season, whether that's had an effect, whether it's just age, whatever it is. It just seems like at least this season is done. We'll see if he retires or see if he goes pitches somewhere else. Maybe he signs a 1-year prove-it deal with the Braves again. I wouldn't mind having him back and giving him another shot on a small deal, but this season, as far as this season is concerned, you have to imagine that this is the end for Colin McHugh unless he really shows something over these next few starts. The other guy, Nick Anderson, he also gave up a couple earned runs. He only got 1 out. I'm less concerned with Nick Anderson because this is his first outing since early July. He went on the IL just before the All-Star break, so I'm less concerned with him. I still think he could be a piece, but he's definitely going to have to pitch better over these next few outings. He did throw over 20 pitches, so as far as being stretched out, that's encouraging. But obviously, we're going to have to see some results, and maybe we see him in the majors soon because you got to see him against major league opponents. You would think if you're going to thrust him into a role in the NLDS as on the postseason roster.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that we're talking about these guys like this because the back end of the rotation is wide open. Pretty much wide open, and Jesse Chavez could look like a tomato can out there, and I'd just go as far to say he's probably going to be on the roster no matter what, which is just crazy because the back end is just wide open, and if Colin McHugh even showed like an inkling of being the guy from last year, or to Jake's point from the earlier parts of this year, he'd be on the roster. But what he just did in AAA is not going to get it done, and the same goes for Nick Anderson. It's just crazy because you just got to show a little bit of I still got it. I can be a weapon in the postseason, and you're going to make this roster.
Yeah, it's funny because we talked about how this was just such like an embarrassment of riches, and we were like, oh, who are we going to leave off? And now we're in a kind of an opposite situation, which, you need a lot of guys in the playoffs, but also, I think this is a team that can probably survive a little more than others just because they still are pretty deep, even though they've lost a couple guys. But yeah, it's definitely not as rosy of an outlook as it was when we were talking about who's going to get left off a month ago. And now it's like, all right, well, who are we going to pick out of these guys that are all struggling?
Well, also, I said it yesterday, though, to put it into some perspective, no team, no postseason contender has 8-9 guys in the bullpen that are just rock solid. No team in the league. So it's not like the Braves have this, glaring weakness. Is it a weakness? Sure. Is it concerning? Sure. But every team blows saves. Every team's bullpen gives up runs. It'll be okay.
Well, I mean, in an ideal situation, these guys aren't even pitching. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah,
The top 4 or 5 guys are going to be pitching every day, like in the playoffs. Like, it's not like we're going to be giving them the rest days. Maybe we give them one if they pitch 3 days in a row, but with off days, you really don't even have to do that because there's so many off days. So, in an ideal world, as long as the starters are giving you at least 5 innings, these guys never even have to pitch. Now, I think Nick Anderson could genuinely become a guy that you rely on in the playoffs. Obviously, we're going to have to see more of him, but he was so good for the Braves early in the season that he could be your 6th, 7th guy or something like that potentially. And same goes with Jesse Chavez. But in an ideal world, none of these guys are even being used. You're going to Pierce Johnson. You're going to Joe Jimenez. You're going to AJ Minter. AJ Minter has shown he can go 2 innings in the playoffs. So in an ideal world, these guys are not being used. So yes, there's been plenty of guys on the Braves playoff rosters. Think about Josh Tomlin, Drew Smyly, that they were never really guys that you wanted on the roster.
Yeah, no, and I feel like that's unfortunately might be Kyle Wright this year. I think he'll get a shot, and maybe he'll just come alive in the playoffs. But what we've seen so far, he's clear. I don't think he's right, no pun intended. Like, there's clearly something going on there. It is just unfortunate, but it might, he might be a break glass in case of emergency kind of guy. It's better to have him in case you need him and pray that something goes right. Once again, no pun intended. But I think he's still a little sore. He probably needs a full off season.
Yeah, well, the 2 starts he's made against a Phillies lineup that is probably, top 5 in baseball are basically rehab starts. And you're going against one of the best lineups, one of the most dangerous lineups in baseball. So that has to be taken into account. Now, these next 2 outings, you don't really have that excuse as far as a rehab start. He threw 80 or 78 pitches last time out. He's pretty much stretched out. It's time to show us something.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, in an ideal world, even guys like Kyle Wright aren't making appearances because he's going to be used out of the bullpen. And the only reason you really even use him is if a guy like Charlie Morton or something only goes 2 or 3 innings. So in an ideal world, none of these guys are being used. I don't think it's as big of an issue, but I am going to keep an eye on Jesse Chavez, Kyle Wright, Nick Anderson, because at the same time, in the same breath as we just said, you might not have to use them. If they show you something, they could be big pieces that you want to use. And it only takes 1 or 2 starts for these guys to get their confidence back and look like an entirely different pitcher. And I'm telling you, Kyle Wright has a good outing going into the postseason. Then he is forced to be used for some reason. And then he has a good outing then. And now you're starting to talk about you make it to the NLCS, you make it to the World Series. He could be a huge part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Prepare for the worst. Hope for the best.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, the Braves are going to be just fine as far as their pitching. Everyone has holes throughout their pitching staff. The Braves have the best starting pitching, I think, in terms of their top 3. But coming up after the break, we're going to talk about Jared Goff. Is he a top 10 quarterback in the league right now?
Yes.